Imagine a city so alive with footsteps, trade, laughter, and ritual that its name echoed across valleys. Yet one morning, without warning, it was gone. No thunder, no fire, no army. Just silence. A city that sank without a sound. History loves noise, wars, coronations, rebellions. But this story, the story of a city that vanished in silence, is different. It is not about kings at war or walls breaking under siege. It is about a community whose voice was erased overnight, leaving only faint traces that whisper through the soil. No one can say for certain when the silence began. Some records suggest a sudden natural disaster. Others hint at something slower, a kind of abandonment that people preferred not to speak of. But all agree. The city's disappearance carried with it a hush so complete that it unsettles historians even today. This was not just a town with a handful of huts. This was a thriving urban center, laid with broad stone streets, marked with granaries, workshops, shrines, and wells. At its peak, perhaps thousands lived there. Its markets hummed with barter, its courtyards filled with song, its temples glowed with offerings of oil and fire. And yet, today, we do not even agree on its real name. The people called it something that has slipped from memory. Scholars refer to it only by a placeholder. The city that sank without a sound. The mystery of silence. Most civilizations leave behind noise in the records. Chronicles written by scribes, legends sung by poets, or scars carved into monuments. This city, strangely, left almost nothing. Its story survives only in fragments, half-buried foundations, pottery shards, the odd inscription chipped into stone. The silence itself became the puzzle. Why so little? Why did no neighboring ruler claim it? Why no mournful songs about its fall? It is as though an entire community agreed, without words, to vanish and be forgotten. For decades, archaeologists wandered the dry hills where the ruins sleep. They unearthed clues. Drains carefully laid, streets lined with houses, painted pots with spirals of color. Every artifact pointed to a people who valued order, water, and rhythm in daily life. And yet none of it explained the ending. The city did not burn. The walls show no marks of fire. The bones unearthed show no signs of massacre. No sudden earthquake cracked the streets in half. And still, one morning, the wells were left empty, the hearths cold, and the gates untended. Life before the silence. To understand the depth of the mystery, one must imagine the life of the city when it thrived. Let us walk its streets in the mind. Picture the wide main road, laid in straight lines, a channel in the center carrying clean water. On either side, merchants spread their cloths. Beads of lapis from faraway mines, carved ivory, baskets of grain, and small clay figurines. Children ran between stalls, their laughter rising above the hum of barter. In the evenings, oil lamps flickered from doorways. Families gathered in open courtyards, where bread baked in clay ovens and elders told stories of ancestors. Songs carried across rooftops. Wells echoed with chatter as pitchers dipped into cool water. The temples glowed with ritual. Priests lit fires, offering prayers not just for the living, but for the river that flowed nearby, for the rains that made the crops swell, for the spirits that watched from unseen places. Everything in the city was tied to rhythm. The turning of seasons, the flowing of water, the cycles of planting and harvest. It was not a loud place, not a place of trumpets and armies. But it was steady, reliable. The kind of life that builds layer upon layer of memory. Which is why its sudden absence feels so sharp. The vanishing. Archaeologists debate whether the vanishing was sudden or slow. Some suggest the river changed its course. A city without water cannot live. Others argue disease crept through silently, forcing people to scatter. Another theory is political. Perhaps a stronger city absorbed its people, leaving their home abandoned. But the most unsettling thought is this. Maybe the city's people themselves chose to leave. Maybe silence was their act of survival, or protest. Maybe they wanted to disappear. The streets show signs of careful abandonment. Tools were put away, not dropped in panic. Granaries were emptied in order, not plundered. The wells, once full, were sealed. As if someone had said, "It is time. We leave now." Echoes in dust. When modern excavators first touched the ruins, they expected chaos. Instead, they found stillness. Doorways with no doors. Roofs long gone but foundations neat, aligned as though waiting for inhabitants to return. In one house, a child's clay toy still sat by a wall. In another, a grinding stone still bore the grooves of use. Everyday life, paused mid-step. It is this stillness that chills more than any battlefield could. Here, silence speaks louder than noise. A puzzle without an answer. To this day, the city's fate remains unsolved. Tourists stand at its ruins, staring at the pattern of walls against the earth, listening for voices that never return. Scholars argue, theories grow, but the truth has slipped away. And so the city holds its place in boring history, not with grand drama, but with a mystery so quiet that it lingers. Sometimes, silence tells the deepest story of all. If you wish to understand the quiet death of a city, you must first understand its river. Civilizations do not simply appear in empty deserts. They grow where water flows. A city's life is the story of its wells, canals, and streams. And for the city that sank without a sound, the river was both its greatest gift and, perhaps, its silent undoing. The pulse of water. The river ran broad and slow in the beginning, carving a plain that was rich in silt. Crops sprang up with little coaxing: wheat, barley, sesame. The people learned to guide the waters with careful hands. Canals stitched the fields, channels whispered through stone drains, and clay jars brimmed with clear, cool liquid. For them, water was not simply utility. It was sacred. Inscriptions show spiral symbols that many scholars interpret as rivers or currents. Ceremonies at shrines honored the flowing water as a divine spirit, half physical, half spiritual. To lose it would be to lose balance itself. The city's rhythm. Every morning began with water. At dawn, the sound of pots clinking echoed from courtyards. Women drew from the wells, men checked the irrigation channels, children splashed at the edges. In workshops, potters shaped clay with dampened hands. Bakers mixed flour with cool river water. Even priests cleansed themselves before lighting temple fires. Water was so abundant in the city's prime that it shaped their very architecture. Houses were built with drains leading outward, not inward, an unusual design that spoke of plenty. The central street was more than a road. It was a living canal, where water coursed gently. Travelers arriving for trade saw the city shining, clean, alive. A subtle shift. But rivers are restless things. They shift, turn, wander away. Archaeological surveys suggest that, centuries into the city's life, the river began to falter. Its course edged southward, grain by grain. The canals that once filled with steady current began to dry at their mouths. At first, the people adapted. They dug deeper wells, extended their channels, even built reservoirs to trap seasonal rains. For a time, it worked. Life went on. Bread still baked, lamps still burned, children still ran through courtyards. But water has a way of pulling loyalty. A city without water cannot hold its children for long. Farmers whispered that fields were turning harder, less generous. Potters complained of clay losing its softness. Traders found new settlements closer to the new course of the river. The slow whisper of abandonment. Unlike the sudden tragedies of fire or war, a river's departure is quiet. It does not announce itself. It leaves slowly, and each family decides in its own season whether to follow or to stay. First went the farmers, seeking richer soil downstream. Then some artisans, drawn by trade where boats still floated. The shrines, once crowded, grew emptier with each passing year. Priests lit lamps for smaller gatherings, their chants echoing against bare walls. But still many clung on. To leave a city is not only to abandon a home. It is to abandon ancestors' memory, the ground where generations walked. The people of this city were not quick to give up. And so, for years, silence grew slowly, like dust gathering in corners. Wells deepened, prayers lengthened, but the current kept slipping away. The turning point. Archaeologists point to one haunting clue: the ceiling of the wells. In several excavated houses, wells were found deliberately capped with slabs of stone. Not collapsed, not ruined, sealed carefully, as though to mark an ending. Why? Perhaps the water had become brackish, no longer safe to drink. Perhaps the act of sealing was symbolic, a final farewell to the spirit of the river that had nourished them. In either case, the meaning is chilling. A sealed well is a city saying, "We do not expect to drink here again." Echoes of water in silence. Today, visitors walking the ruins may not see the river at all. It lies miles away, its new course carving a different valley. Yet the earth remembers. If you kneel among the broken foundations after rain, you can see faint rivulets carving tiny paths where channels once ran. Close your eyes, and you can almost hear the trickle, the laughter of children, the slap of wet clay in the potter's hands. The city may be dry now, but its bones still hum with memory. Theories of disappearance. Some scholars argue that the shifting river alone explains the silence. It was not sudden collapse, but patient erosion of livelihood. Over time, families trickled away, until one day the last household closed its door. Others, however, say the evidence is more complex. The wells suggest careful, communal action, not just slow scattering. Could it be that the river's departure was not only environmental, but also spiritual? Did the people see in it a sign, a message from the divine, that it was time to move on? History does not tell us. But what is clear is this: when the river forgot them, the city had little choice but to accept silence. The weight of quiet. And so the city sank, not beneath waves, not beneath ash, but beneath absence. The absence of water, the absence of trade, the absence of voices. It did not end with screams. It ended with sighs, with families leading oxen down dry paths, with priests extinguishing their fires for the last time. And when the last footstep faded, the city was left to the wind. Its streets, once polished by water and walking, grew dusty. Its wells, once sweet, grew bitter. Its shrines, once glowing, grew cold. The river had moved on, and so had life. But the stones remained. Stones and silence. The aftertaste of memory. When a city disappears, it rarely disappears for everyone. Neighbors see its absence. Travelers notice empty streets where stalls once shouted with trade. Stories grow in the space where facts fade. And so, though the city itself left no direct words, fragments of its memory lived on in others. In nearby villages, elders told of a city of silence, where once there had been music. Some said the gods punished its people for pride. Others whispered of a curse, of wells sealed to trap restless spirits. Farmers, passing near the ruins, warned children not to linger. The ground remembers, they would mutter, and sometimes it pulls. Folklore as a substitute for history. Folklore often replaces records. Where scribes do not write, storytellers improvise. Over generations, they blur truth and myth until both become inseparable. One tale describes the city as cursed by the river itself. In the story, the river spirit fell in love with a young woman from the city. But when she refused to marry the spirit, the waters grew jealous and abandoned the people. Each year, when the river swelled elsewhere, villagers claimed it was the spirit carrying away new brides, never forgiving the insult. Another legend says the city's priests betrayed their own gods by hoarding grain in secret chambers. In response, silence fell like a divine punishment. Voices stilled, fires quenched, and even the animals refused to make sound. By dawn, the city was abandoned, as if swallowed by a hush deeper than death. These are not facts, yet they reflect something truer than archaeology can show: the emotional weight of a vanished place. For the living, silence is not natural. It must be explained, given shape. Folklore gave that shape. Travelers' accounts. Occasionally, scribbled notes from travelers shed a dim light. A fragment of a trader's log, centuries old, mentions passing the dry city where no water flows. Another record, found in a distant archive, refers to a market that had moved from the ghost city to the new riverbank. Such records are sparse, often one line in longer lists of goods and routes. But each whisper confirms what archaeology suggests: the city lingered as an absence known to others. Memory in objects. Sometimes, memory does not travel in words but in objects. Pottery styles from the vanished city appear in later settlements far downstream. The spiral designs, the precise shapes of jars, the baked-in fingerprints of artisans. These show that families carried pieces of their old home into new beginnings. A bead carved from semi-precious stone, identical to those once common in the lost city, was found in a settlement 100 miles away. Was it a trade good? Or was it a keepsake, carried by someone who once lived in the city that sank without a sound? Such objects are history's way of remembering when voices have gone. A strange reverence. Centuries later, when nomads grazed animals near the ruins, they treated the site with caution. Some avoided it altogether. Others built small cairns of stones at its edges, as if marking boundaries. To them, the place was neither ordinary ground nor fully sacred. It was something in between, a scar that demanded respect. Even in its emptiness, the city influenced behavior. It shaped routes, taboos, superstitions. In this way, it lived on, not as a bustling center, but as a silent landmark of fear and wonder. Silence as a story. Why did people keep speaking of the silence? Because silence itself is haunting. A burned city offers closure. Flames explain the end. A conquered city tells of victors and losers. But a city without sound leaves a wound of questions. Neighbors told the story not to honor the city, but to protect themselves from uncertainty. Silence is contagious. If it happened there, could it happen here? Their stories, of curses, of jealous rivers, of divine punishment, were shields against fear. By shaping the silence into narrative, they controlled it. Historians and the challenge of folklore. Modern historians tread carefully with these tales. Folklore does not give reliable facts, yet it does reveal how absence was perceived. The image of a jealous river spirit, for instance, might echo the very real shift of waterways. A tale of greedy priests could reflect social tensions that archaeological ruins cannot record. What matters is not whether the stories are literally true, but that they exist at all. They prove the city did not vanish from human thought. It lingered quietly, in the imagination of those who survived around it. The ghost in the landscape. Today, when one stands among the ruins, it is not difficult to see how memory clung to the place. The land is oddly quiet, even now. Wind sighs through the broken walls. Birds avoid nesting in the old foundations. Shadows gather earlier than they should. Whether these impressions are real or imagined hardly matters. People always felt them, and so they shaped stories to fit. The city may be silent, but silence itself became its loudest legacy. From memory to mystery. By the time written history reached maturity in the region, the city was already legend. No one remembered its real name, its leaders, or its precise customs. But they remembered its absence. They remembered that something once stood there, something large and orderly, and that it had dissolved into nothing without a cry. And so, the people who remembered turned a vanished city into a mystery. One that outlived their own generations, passed down in murmurs, until scholars of today still ask the same questions. What happened here? Why so silent? A city reborn in dust. For centuries, the ruins lay unnoticed, half buried in sand and scrub. Shepherds grazed animals along its edges, villagers skirted its outlines, and winds slowly carved away the walls. To most, it was simply a strange patch of ground where nothing grew too well. It was not until the 19th century, when curiosity about lost civilizations swept across the world, that scholars finally turned their gaze toward the silent mounds. What they found beneath the earth astonished them. Not chaos, but order. Streets aligned with care, walls built in precise grids, drains more advanced than many living towns of the time. The first spades. Early excavators worked with crude tools and clumsy methods. Yet even their rough digging revealed something extraordinary. Clay seals stamped with strange symbols. Beads carved from semi-precious stones. Pottery, painted with the same spirals seen in legends. The silence of centuries cracked open, not with sound, but with objects that seemed to whisper. We were here. We lived. We built. One archaeologist wrote in his notes, "The site is like a city paused in breath, waiting for its people to return." His words still resonate, because the ruins do not feel destroyed, only abandoned. Streets without footsteps. As excavations deepened, a clearer picture emerged. The city was laid out in astonishing symmetry. Streets ran straight, houses built to consistent proportions, drains cutting under walls to carry waste away. This was not a crude village. This was urban planning of a high order. Yet, curiously, no palace was found, no fortress, no throne. The city seemed to belong to its people equally, a rare balance in history where rulers did not tower above all others. Still, the most striking thing was the absence of endings. No collapsed walls from earthquakes. No fire-scorched remains. No layer of ash. It was as though life had simply stepped aside, leaving everything in place. The wells tell a story. Perhaps the most haunting discoveries were the wells. Dozens dotted the city, carefully constructed with stone linings. Many were dry, of course, after centuries of neglect. But some had been deliberately sealed with slabs. To an archaeologist, this detail was chilling. People do not seal wells unless they are leaving for good. It was an act of closure, a ritual of farewell. It said, "We will not drink here again." The wells became silent witnesses, their sealed mouths guarding secrets no text could explain. Artifacts of ordinary life. In the layers of soil, small objects revealed the rhythm of daily existence. Terracotta figurines of animals, perhaps children's toys. Beads and bangles, likely worn by women as ornaments. Grinding stones still bearing the smooth grooves of use. These were not treasures of kings or spoils of conquest. They were the quiet remains of households. The story of the city's people emerged not from monuments, but from cups, toys, and tools, remnants of lives lived in routine, then left behind. The unreadable script. Among the most tantalizing finds were clay seals pressed with a script no one can yet read. Tiny symbols carved with precision appear again and again. Lines, loops, animal shapes, mysterious marks. Scholars have tried for over a century to decode them. Some say they are names of merchants, others claim they are records of trade, still others think they are sacred prayers. But the truth remains hidden. Without translation, the city cannot tell us its name. It remains anonymous, even in history books. The irony is painful. The city wrote, but we cannot listen. Its voice exists pressed in clay, but the sound is locked away. Frustration and wonder. Archaeologists often speak of mixed emotions here. The wonder of uncovering a city so advanced, so orderly, so alive with evidence of prosperity, and the frustration of not knowing why it ended. Some diggers described a feeling of being mocked by silence. Each new wall, each artifact added details to the picture, yet none revealed the final answer. The city seemed determined to keep it secret. Theories again. The finds reinforced earlier theories. The sealed wells suggested water had failed. The lack of weapons hinted that war was not the cause. The neat abandonment implied planning, not panic. But no theory satisfies completely. Some archaeologists began to see the silence itself as intentional. Was it possible the people wanted to erase themselves from history? To vanish so thoroughly that even their name dissolved? It is a theory as unsettling as it is unlikely. Yet the ruins invite such speculation. Walking the ruins today. Visitors who walk the site today often describe a strange sensation. The streets are still visible, their straight lines cutting across the earth. Foundation walls outline houses. Steps lead nowhere. Wells sit like hollow eyes. You can stand at what was once a busy marketplace and imagine the sound of barter, the scent of bread, the laughter of children. And then you realize all of it ended. Not with fire or collapse, but with footsteps walking away. The silence presses in. Not empty silence, but heavy, expectant silence, as though the city is still listening for its people to return. Archaeology meets emotion. Boring history often deals in facts, layers, carbon dates, pottery shards. But here, even the most disciplined archaeologist cannot escape emotion. The city that sank without a sound pulls at the imagination. Its silence becomes personal, as if it asks each visitor, if your home were abandoned tomorrow, what would remain to tell your story? And so, though it offers little drama, the city captivates precisely because it resists explanation. Why silence matters. Most cities remembered in history are remembered for noise. Trumpets of conquest, shouts of rebellion, or cries of collapse. But the city that sank without a sound reminds us of something different. That history is also shaped by what is absent, by the things that leave quietly. Its silence teaches us that not every ending is violent. Some are gradual, deliberate, or even gentle. And in their gentleness, they unsettle us more deeply than battles ever could. Lessons from the ruins. When we study the ruins, we are not only looking for explanations of the past. We are also confronting our own fragility. The city was advanced for its time, well-planned streets, clean water systems, bustling markets. And yet it vanished. If such an orderly society could dissolve without a sound, what does that say about ours? We build skyscrapers, networks, machines that connect continents. But all of it rests on fragile balances, rivers, climates, soils, trust. Just as the vanished city depended on its river, we depend on forces we barely control. The ruins are not just about them. They are about us. Silence as memory. Paradoxically, the silence of the city is what gives it voice today. Had it ended in the usual way, war, fire, conquest, it might have been just another story in textbooks. Instead, because it sank quietly, it compels us to lean closer, to listen harder. The silence itself became its loudest legacy. It draws archaeologists, tourists, storytellers, and listeners like you. We want to know why. We want to solve the puzzle. And in that wanting, the city remains alive. Modern reflections. In classrooms, professors present the city as a case study in mystery. Students argue, was it climate? Migration? A spiritual exodus? Each theory reveals more about us than about the past. Our fears, our values, our need for certainty. Artists sketch the ruins, capturing the geometry of its streets. Writers borrow the silence as metaphor for forgotten lives. Travelers walk the site at sunset, feeling the weight of absence settle in their bones. Though unnamed, the city touches lives far beyond its vanished walls. The humility of history. Perhaps the greatest lesson it leaves is humility. We imagine history as a story we can fully know if only we dig enough, read enough, analyze enough. But here, at the city that sank without a sound, we are reminded that some answers will never be found. Not everything can be solved. Some stories remain incomplete, fragments that echo without conclusion. And that is part of the human record too. Standing in the dust. Picture yourself standing at the site now. The sun is low, casting long shadows across the stone outlines of homes. The air is dry still. You hear only the wind, the faint crunch of your steps. You stand in the center of what was once a thriving community. Thousands lived, worked, laughed, prayed here. And then silence. You realize you are not standing in a ruin of tragedy, but in a monument to quietness. The silence is not emptiness. It is a presence thick, almost alive, reminding you that history is not only written in noise. The endless question. And so the city lingers, not as a solved puzzle, but as an open question. Why did it end? Why did it leave no clear trace? Why do its sealed wells and neat streets still feel as though they are waiting? We may never know. But perhaps that is the point. Some stories are not meant to close. Some are meant to remain whispers in the soil, questions in the air. The city's silence becomes our story. A city without a sound. When you leave the site, walking back to the modern road, you carry the silence with you. It clings like dust on your clothes, like an echo in your thoughts. You realize that boring history, the kind that doesn't scream of kings or wars, can sometimes be the most profound. Because in that silence, you hear not only the past, but also the fragile heartbeat of the present.